Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, Alaska. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 13th of September, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can give us a call at 1-800-473-0391, and that number is going to be very useful to you if you're watching at 5 o'clock in the morning now on some of our new program times across Juneau, Bethel, and in the Anchorage area. The weather.gov/Alaska website is always open to you. If you change out the word Alaska to Anchorage, Juneau, or Fairbanks, you'll also get dialed in to our National Weather Service web pages that will serve your communities a little bit better. You can always email me with questions about the program change, or if you have questions about navigating through those new websites, feel free to let me know. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov or david.snider@noaa.gov will get you there as well. Here's a look at those time changes. Once again, if you're watching at 5 o'clock in the morning on Alaska Public Media, you do have some earlier options now. The time change does affect the Anchorage, Bethel, and Juneau communities there on Alaska Public Media, but if you are in range of the AKwx system, you can tune in there at 5:30 p.m. That is the same time we're actually broadcasting live. If you're watching on KUAC, welcome back. The channel is 9.4 there if you're still looking for that on the broadcast dial or channel there, as it were. And you can also watch that on cable channel 6 in the Fairbanks area, I believe, on GCI. 360 North is still, and as far as we know, always will be at 7:30 p.m. So if you have that, it might say Alaska on the name tag there on your satellite or cable provider. And then, of course, Alaska Public Media the following morning at 5 o'clock. You can also watch on YouTube. Just type in on the search bar AKwx TV, short for Alaska Weather. We also have the link on our TV web page there on weather.gov/Anchorage. So you can find that, or as always, give me a call or email. I'll be happy to steer you in the right direction. All right, on to the weather. The red is bad, right? Weather means warning, and that is a winter storm warning for the northern slopes of the Brooks Range. That is a winter storm warning for as much as about 6 to 12 inches, it looks like. The storm warning will continue until about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and a lot of this is going to be higher terrain kind of stuff, above 1,000 to 2,000 feet, especially on the north side. And you'll notice that the coastal areas there and the villages along the coast are not in this advisory at all, or the warning, I should say, but it does look like there will be an opportunity for some rain and snow showers in the region. Now, as we were looking at temperatures earlier today, we noticed that those readings were really close to the freezing point, so don't be surprised if you're seeing that rain and snow mix continue and maybe pick up a little bit into the evening hours. We'll check those temperatures in just a bit. And as always, our friends there at the Fairbanks Weather Forecast Office that are serving your northern communities would love to know how much snow you have. So call it in, send them an email. You can do that on your phone now. There's ways to submit storm reports that way. 1 inch, 2 inches, whatever you have. When it stops snowing, let them know. If it starts doing things that are unusual in your community, let them know. And you can use the hashtag as well. If you're sending out a tweet, we love pictures, use the hashtag AKwx, short for Alaska Weather. On the south side is the yellow shades here. That is the south side of the Brooks Range Summits. That is a winter weather advisory, also posted until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Guess what? If you're driving northward up the highway, you're probably going to run into some of the snow. Again, a lot of this is going to be north of Ambler and above 2,000 feet. You're looking at stormfall totals of 4 to 8 inches there. Again, above 2,000 feet and generally north of Ambler there. So, build in some extra travel time if you got to go somewhere. It's about that time of the year. And this is going to be that wetter kind of snow as we as we're seeing there with a very wet atmosphere sitting on top of northern parts of Alaska. So winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, all of that ends tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, and let us know how much snow you have. On to the satellite picture. You can see one big weather maker out there across the North Pacific and western Bering Sea. It is that great curl in the sky. Almost looks like a ram's horn, doesn't it? Low pressure sitting out there between Kiska and Attu, pulling in a very wet chain of moisture right across the Alaska Peninsula over the Pribilofs and into the western Bering Sea. Why is it snowing? Well, low pressure sitting up here as well, and this has got a great gob of moisture wrapped around it, and with that, of course, colder temperatures have been brought in across the North Slope and the higher terrain, and that whole process is working very efficiently to produce a decent amount of early season snow for the North Slope there and the Brooks Range. As we take a look at the southeast, that moisture flow that some call an atmospheric river, you may have heard that term before, is simply a line, a very concentrated and a very well-structured line of moisture feeding along a certain path. When those move into coastal areas like Alaska, they tend to wring out a lot of that rain there, just as if a river or fire hose was pointed at your community. Well, that river or that moisture flow is shifting away now, and because of that, we've got some slightly drier conditions. We have seen a little bit of rain from time to time around the eastern sections of Alaska today, but most of that has not been fairly widespread as it was a couple days ago with some of the stronger winds. You can see a lot of dry air across northern parts of the Gulf and western Alaska, southwestern Alaska especially. We're kind of in between storm systems there. There is another round of rain coming, and as that approaches, you'll start to see rain move up the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian Chain into Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait as we head into the early morning hours of tomorrow, and then eventually filling in all of south central with more rainfall there and moving up against the Alaska Range. So travelers and certainly aviators, pay attention to the weather. Conditions will be changing in south central tomorrow as we go throughout your day. A look out west shows the progressive system that is slowly working down the chain is going to have to do something different, though, as it moves into the northern Gulf and western Alaska. So I think what we're going to see is that low pressure system will probably break into pieces there rather than remain one big concentrated ball of storm as it moves into the Gulf of Alaska. Here's a look at the surface chart. We've got one low here across the eastern Gulf, 1,014 millibars there, and some rain around coastal and southern parts of southeast earlier today. Around south central, generally drier conditions than what we've seen for 24 hours now. And you can see some light rain around Fairbanks, quite a bit on the radar earlier today. On the northern side of that front where the cold air is, that's where the snow is over the Brooks Range. And again, stormfall totals there could make it upwards of 6 to 12 inches on the north side of the summits, 4 to 8 on the south side. And again, that's where that winter weather advisory is. Across coastal areas, a little bit of rain and snow mixed together. Still warm enough for that mixture, at least earlier this afternoon anyway. Out to the west, that low pressure system's a 979 millibar low as it moves eastward across the Bering. It is going to start breaking up into some other pieces there. Take a look at this. Here's the forecast for tonight, and you can see another wave of low pressure across the interior. That's not necessarily a temperature boundary as much as it is kind of a pressure difference that is helping to encourage the clouds and that moisture pattern to create snow across the northern and eastern sections of Alaska. Rain showers down to the south for southeast. Some areas in the northern and central areas of the Panhandle will be looking at showers stretching out into the Gulf. And then our front is working its way up toward the Pribilofs tonight at 978 millibars. Low pressure behind that stirring up rain and fog for many across the chain. Going into Wednesday, the front is kind of creeping its way into the Gulf now. You can see showers up and down the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay and covering up all of the Gulf Coast, all the way from southeast, wrapping all the way out toward the Aleutians as well. And for southwestern Alaska, the YK Delta, generally a lot of the showers will be south of Bethel. It looks like northward, you'll get into some drier air for Norton Sound. The Seward Peninsula could be looking at the sun tomorrow. And on the north side of the Brooks Range, you're still dealing with snow. However, conditions will be improving as far as snowfall goes from about 6 a.m. onward. So plan for that to slow down as you go through your day. Conditions on the south side and the central and upper Yukon Valley, we'll be looking at some rain showers throughout the day. That should start to increase in coverage as we get into Thursday with low pressure starting to fall apart a little bit. You'll notice the values there are coming up, so that means the low pressure system is weakening or diminishing. But it's still going to have some wind working down the west coast there from the north and northeasterly direction, and you'll see that in the marine charts in just a little bit here. That's also going to keep that south and westerly flow working wet air up into south central Alaska. In the meantime, another wave of low pressure has taken shape here across the central and eastern Gulf, and that should only encourage wet weather back across southeastern Alaska, and the winds will probably come up and change direction a little bit too as that starts to pick up. In the north, the snow should be continuing across some parts of the higher terrain, but it may not be quite as widespread. That's a look at Thursday there with rain and snow generally in light form out across the North Slope and coastal communities as we go into Thursday. Let's talk temperatures. For southeast, we saw readings back in the 50s and 60s today. The capital city just shy of 60 at 2 o'clock. Lower 60s around Klawock into Ketchikan and Annette, 52 in Hyder. Sitka was 57. Yakutat 59 degrees, 58 in Cordova. Valdez was looking at 57 late this afternoon. It was 64 in Seward, 56 in Homer, and 58 in Kenai. For Anchorage and folks around the valley, upper 50s to lower 60s today. Moving up the road toward Talkeetna, we saw just shy of 60 degrees. Healy and Greeley, well, Fort Greeley anyway, lower to mid 50s. 40s, I should say, to about 50 degrees at Fort Greeley. It was 45 in Healy, 45 for Fairbanks as well, 50 in Eagle. Tok and Northway saw temps in the lower 50s today, 36 in Fort Yukon. The headwaters there in that region generally is starting to collect that cold air, and those low flat areas are really good at just holding that cold, and that's going to be one of our colder spots as usual here in the next couple of weeks. 28 degrees up in Arctic Village, 27 around Anaktuvuk Pass, and the coastal areas looking at temps right there at 32 degrees. Boy, it is just holding on to those temps around Wainwright, 32. Looks like Point Hope and Point Lay were just a hair above the freezing point. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse also looking at temps at or just above freezing today, 36 in Kaktovik. We saw readings around Kotzebue at 40 degrees, 39 in Shishmaref, 43 still, mild in Nome, 46 around Deering. And as you get around to Unalakleet, 42 degrees, 46 in McGrath. Bethel saw 45, Savunga 41 degrees out there in St. Lawrence Island, and lower 50s for St. Paul and St. George into Bristol Bay. It's still very mild around King Salmon at 60, 57 in Dillingham. Lake Iliamna also in the mid 60s there, 58 in Kodiak, upper 50s for a good chunk of the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint had 55, on Alaska and Dutch Harbor 54, and low to mid 50s for Attu, Adak, and looks like many areas out to the east, right about the same temperature there. Atka also fairly mild at 55. Now, low temperatures overnight are going to stay mild for southwest, but once you get into the Alaska Range, the middle Tanana Valley, even the eastern interior, and certainly north of the Yukon, temps are back in the 20s and 30s there and close to freezing if not below it. Southwest, lower 40s, 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, low 50s for southeast, south central, in the lower to mid 40s with the North Slope in the upper 20s to low 30s. High temps tomorrow close to freezing. A few places may skirt above it, including Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. For the middle Tanana Valley, mid 50s for you, still looking at rain chances in southwest, upper 50s. The Alaska Peninsula could still see a few spots in the lower 60s tomorrow. The central and western chain still in the mid 50s, southeast, upper 50s and lower 60s. South central, including the Cook Inlet region and Anchorage, the valleys, as well as Prince William Sound, probably looking at 50s again tomorrow. Here's a look at flying weather now. IFR conditions will be found across some of the higher terrain down into the misty fjords in southern southeast, coastal parts of southeast. The outer coast, that is, starts off at MVFR. MVFR for most of the North Slope, but look at the wide area of IFR. Through rain and snow you go. So watch out for poor visibility there, as well as Norton Sound and parts of the central and western chain. As we get into the afternoon, look for slight changes in southeast. We're still going to be dealing with IFR across the southern parts of southeast, as well as some of the higher terrain working its way into the Lynn Canal. So keep your eye on that if you're heading north or south in northern southeast. Prince William Sound and the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula will see developing areas of IFR, as well as parts of the western Alaska Range around Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. And the Brooks Range, Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, probably still having trouble tomorrow afternoon with visibility, and watch for increasing IFR across the Chukchi Seacoast as well. So changes all day long in many of your favorite places. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, as you saw, probably dealing with IFR through a good chunk of the day tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass leaning over toward IFR as we go into the day. A Rainy Pass, expecting to see some changes toward MVFR. Windy Pass will probably be there most of the day with marginal conditions. Maybe some improvements in Isabel Pass, looking for VFR to develop in the afternoon. Mentasta Pass may sneak out clean at VFR through most of the day. Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR through most of your Wednesday. Portage Pass, looks like at least on the east side it'll lean over toward IFR as we go. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions developing in the afternoon. Here's a look at freezing levels, and of course the cold air is no surprise to you if you've been watching that weather pattern. That's been dropping southward. Surface freezing line over a good chunk of the Seward Peninsula, the Brooks Range, and of course the North Slope tomorrow. Down south across the Gulf Coast, you're looking at 6,000 foot levels as high as 10,000 feet out across southern parts of southeast for your early Wednesday morning. Icing potential is certainly there, and it's lowest up across the eastern Brooks Range and the eastern part of the North Slope and the Beaufort Seacoast. Above 4,000 feet, we're going to call it light to isolated moderate, and hit and miss across southeast, generally above 10,000 feet, and it's pretty high out across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta as well. Again, generally light to isolated moderate. The jet stream is in active position right now. If you could flip a switch to on, this is how it would look. We've got a pretty decent conveyor belt that's just racing across the North Pacific, and we have several waves of low pressure, each one capable of churning up more surface weather systems that are capable of changing our weather in a wetter or colder way. As we look at 9,000 feet, you can see that south and westerly flow coming in across the western Gulf. 30 to 40 knots. Winds are generally a little lighter into southern parts of southeast, but certainly wrapping around high pressure to the south. Winds are generally light west of Bethel and west of, let's say, Tanana, and into areas like Kobuk, about 5 knots there. A northwesterly flow onshore in the North Slope, and low pressure sitting just north of Adak and Atka with the strongest winds on the south side of that. At 3,000 feet, similar conditions with the winds up to 40 and 50 knots. Southerlies across the Gulf, more of a west and southwesterly flow into southeastern Alaska, generally light winds in the interior, but north and easterly winds cutting through the Bering Strait could create some isolated areas of chop, probably around the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island as usual. Easterlies in the northern Bering and northwesterlies coming across the Arctic Ocean and reaching the Beaufort Seacoast at 10 to 15 knots tomorrow. Here's a look at turbulence then. We would watch areas around Sitka below 4,000 feet in the afternoon. A lot of these changes will increase in coverage during the afternoon, so that's what we've drawn here. Below 4,000 feet for the western Alaska Range, areas around Anchorage, as well as the Capes out across southwest, the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, and part of the Kotzebue Sound region, generally below 4,000 feet for some light to isolated, moderate, a little bit of chop throughout your day. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
They're called hooligan candlefish, cigarfish. They're a really, really oily fish. They're a little on the mushy side, so we like to fry them. And we decided to go upriver, about maybe half mile upriver, and fish off the bank there. For me, one of the nice things about the fish is actually that there's a lot of other populations other than like the local Athabascans and Alaskan Native people that go down there and take advantage of it. There's a lot of Pacific Island people, a lot of Korean people, a lot of other Asian folks out there. They all love these little fish, and they all go out there every year and catch them, bring them home. I think people really just enjoy getting their own food. Obviously, we don't have to. We could just go to the store, but it's kind of like the principle, you know, you go out there and you're going out there with your family and your friends, and you're, you know, getting food. I take my family out. That's the way I grew up. I grew up in Nome. We spent a lot of our winter and definitely all of our summer subsistence hunting and fishing. And for me, I don't know, I just feel like it was a great way to grow up, and it's really foreign to me when people don't have those experiences. And so I really, really wanted my kids to, you know, have that experience and to know where their food comes from. You know, I don't want them just to think that all their fish comes from the grocery store or comes packaged in little packages of meat. Like, I want them to know that it comes from other beings that live on this earth, and, you know, for them to have some respect for that. There's a lot of other distractions, like my oldest son really, really likes Angry Birds a lot, way too much. I want him to learn to enjoy being outside and learning to enjoy harvesting your own food. When I was growing up, actually, my mom, she gets amazed by this, but she literally would wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, and go out and play, and she would have no clue where we were or what we were doing until lunchtime. Then we'd come back hungry, eat, and then go back outside and play again until it was night. I don't know, maybe if the world's changed or just because she's gotten older or whatever, but now with my kids, like, she can't even let them out of her sight. I started working in canneries. I started working on the docks for a little bit, ended up on a tender, went over to Bristol Bay, so I spent some time commercial fishing. Then I actually traveled around the United States as a pitch salesman for a little bit. like the dude who sells the ShamWow. Kind of like the commercials that you see on TV where everything's $29.95, $19.95, $9.95. I would do that live starting at the Alaska State Fair. I stopped being a pitch salesman. I went to my brother's Marine Corps graduation, my younger brother, and when I was watching that, I decided that was something that I would like to do. And then went back home to Alaska and then joined the Marine Corps from Alaska. Well, we were scouts. Our job was to be on the ground. And so our job was anything that had to do on the ground. We were forward recon. We'd clear houses and stuff like that. Every time that we stopped, we'd do a sweep for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. I'm sure everybody knows what those are by now. Even when I was growing up, my mom said that after I got done with high school, I was going to go to college, and I wasn't going to college for me. She said that, you need to go to college so you can learn, and then you can come back, and then you can, serve your people, basically. I guess that just was part of the way that we were raised. I mean, even when we were out fishing, I wasn't just fishing for myself. I was actually fishing for friends and family as well. And it's not a burden or anything. I'm happy to do it. And the Marine Corps wasn't a burden either. It was kind of a pain at times, but I really feel like maybe part of the reason why I try to do the subsistence stuff so much is because the education that I want to get now is my AKwx education, Even though I did grow up subsistence and stuff like that, we moved away right around the time that I would have been going out and starting to do things like seal hunting and going on the big hunting trips and stuff like that. So I never actually got to do that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to learn it all now, and I'd like to go home and I'd like to learn the AKwx language. I know some, I don't know enough, and I'd like to learn more, about how we do things. My AKwx name is Nava. How we name is that when you're born, whoever has died around the time that you're born, you get their name. So I got my name, was from my great-grandma, Mamie Seaton. Her name was Nava. I don't know what it means. I asked one of my uncles about it, and he just told me that the name was one of those, it was an old name, so they didn't actually know what it meant anymore. And so I think about that, about how far back that name goes. If it's thousands of years, if it's 5,000 years, 6,000 years, how far back that name goes. And so it's this, it's a really tangible connection with my past and history, and it helps ground me and to know where I come from, and that I literally am standing here because of all the people that came before me on this entire planet. I think that we've become really arrogant and really disconnected from not only just like the earth, and I also hate how cheesy that sounds now. Like, people have made it cheesy to where I sound like some sort of hippie when I say the connection to the earth, but hey, that's legit. I mean, we are part of the earth.
On to marine weather now. Southerlies on the inside, 15 to 25 with seas from 3 to 5 feet tomorrow. Lighter winds on the outside, just outside of the Dixon entrance. So look for those winds to come up from the south and east. About 20 knots with an 8-foot sea, picking up even more to 25 knots tomorrow or Thursday. 9-foot seas there. Southerlies picking up on the outer coast, and 15 to as high as 30 knots on the inside. 3 to 6-foot seas there, with 5 to as high as 8-foot seas in the north, and 6 to 9-foot seas down the southern outer coast there as you get into Thursday. Across south central, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound. On the high side, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Northeasterlies on the northern Cook Inlet, 15 knots there, and east to southeasterly winds through the Barrens, 20 to 25 with 6 to 8-foot seas in the western Gulf and the eastern side of Kodiak Island. Southerlies 25 knots with an 8-foot sea on Wednesday, diminishing to about 20 knots with the southerlies and 9-foot seas there on Thursday. Light and variable winds in the northern Cook as we get into Thursday afternoon. Southeasterlies pick up a little bit more to 25 knots with 6-foot seas, and southerlies on the outside of Montague Island, 20 to 25 with 8 to 9-foot seas. Shelikof Strait looking at 20. from the south with a 4-foot sea on Thursday. Inside Bristol Bay, southeasterlies at 30 knots with a 5-foot sea. South and westerlies on the Pacific coast, 8 to 10-foot seas there. And southerlies down the Bering Sea coast, 20 with a 5-foot sea expected on Wednesday, diminishing just a little bit to 4 feet as you get into Thursday. Southeasterlies holding on at 20 knots with a 3-foot sea inside of Bristol Bay, and southerlies down the Pacific coast, 25 knots with an 11 to 13-foot sea on Thursday. For the Aleutians, northwesterlies all the way west of Adak, all the way out toward Attu at 25 to 35. 8-foot seas north of Kiska there, about in the Bering Sea coast, 17-foot seas though expected on the Pacific side. So a huge difference if you're coming through. 8 to 7-foot seas across the central and eastern Bering Sea coast, 25 to 30 knot winds from the south and west along the Pacific, with seas as high as 19 feet there south of Adak and Atka on Wednesday. By Thursday, a little bit of a shift. Northerlies coming into the Bering Sea coast, north and east winds from Unalaska to Nikolsky at 15 knots with a 5-foot sea, and then north and westerlies still holding on at 25 knots, 12 to 13-foot seas in the west. The Pacific coast seas looking at 13 to 14-foot seas as we go into Thursday. Along the west coast, northerlies coming through the Bering Strait are going to be blustery at times, 25 to 35 knots in the region, 5 to as high as 17 feet west of St. Matthew. Easterlies coming off of southwestern Alaska at 15 to 30 with 8-foot seas around St. Paul and St. George. For Thursday, look for that northeasterly wind to come in a little more, 25 to 35 knots in the north with seas as high as 15 feet there. Kuskokwim Delta is looking at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, and northerlies for the Pribilofs still there at 25 knots with a 10-foot sea. And for the north coast, look for northwesterlies into the Chukchi Sea coast. A little bit further south into Kotzebue Sound region, you're looking at 20 to 25 with 4 to 5-foot seas. Northerlies light around Prudhoe Bay, and easterlies coming into the eastern Beaufort Sea coast at 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Winds diminish just about in all areas with more of a westerly push from Point Lay eastward toward Kaktovik, 5 to 10 with 3-foot seas there. Northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound still there, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea, 3-foot seas up the coast toward Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. Winter storm warnings north of the Brooks Range summits lasting until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Looking for 6 to 12 inches of storm total snowfall there. On the south side, a winter weather advisory that includes areas north of Ambler and above 2,000 feet. Watch for snow to diminish throughout the day. Meanwhile, rain fills in along the Gulf Coast as we go into Thursday. Thanks again.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.